Good evening and welcome to the Cumberland County. Our first session tonight is workshop. I'm Neil Jameson, I'm chair of the board. And our topic tonight is the county jail staffing and financial issues about the county jail. Initially I'll defer and reach out to Jim.
Well, thank you. Back in January at the commissioners meeting, the commissioners asked staff to come to this meeting prepared to present information around the staffing of the jail and also the finances of the jail. And so through the next 14 PowerPoint slides that we have prepared, Don Goulet and Alex Kimball will, in their respective fields, take you through the hiring process and what we're experiencing through our new software program, as well as Alex will then wrap up with the financial standing of the jail as we enter into 2023. So with that, I'd invite Don Goulet to begin his side of the PowerPoint presentation on the current hiring practices of the jail and how successful we've been over the last number of months.
Good evening. So Amy and I put together just a brief overview based on what we think we heard you ask for, based on the hiring process. So the first slide takes into account the hiring process going back to September 1, 2022 to 2/11, which is when we put this together, finalized it. So the current process right now takes about 7 weeks to complete. We do feel that is one of our detractors in our process, that if we could shorten that up, we might capture a few more people in the hiring process. So the bullets that are talking about kind of give you an overview of what a process looks like. We have the application. They do basically Zoom interviews. Again, that's to help streamline. Then there is a pretty extensive pre-employment questionnaire and required documentation by the candidate. Then goes into background. Then there's the polygraph questionnaire, which goes to the polygrapher, which helps them determine what they're going to ask for questions. And then there's a post-offer physical. In each one of these pieces, it breaks off into different groups. So the first group is HR, the first two pieces. The second piece goes to the chief deputy. If he approves, it then goes on to one of the lieutenants at the law enforcement center that starts the background check. If it moves on, then the polygraph questionnaire is given back to the candidate. It goes to our agency's polygraphist is back 100% up and running. So she's doing the polygraph, and then it comes back into HR for the post-offer physical. To kind of give you a breakdown on what we're looking at for actual employment numbers or candidate numbers during the same time period, we had 167 people apply for correctional positions. Out of that, during that period of time, only 10 were hired. Since that period of time, 3 were either terminated or resigned. And 17, again, as of the 2/11 date, are in one of those processes that we just went through in the prior slide. So during that period of time, we're a net gain of 7 candidates. In anticipation of a question that I would be asking, and Amy, so we kind of gave you a slide to break down kind of an overview of where people fit into that prior slide. So 48 failed to respond to the next phase for the interview. We're going to guess that that percentage is people that are maybe collecting some type of benefit and have to show that they're applying for jobs. So that's probably a fair number of those people that are in that category. Same thing with slide number 2 with a group that just failed to return the pre-employment questionnaire or the documents, or possibly also that, based on some of the questions that are in there, they pretty much knew what their answer would probably not, would cause them to fail to go on. 18 were failed for not meeting the minimum requirements. 15, and this is, in my opinion, kind of a key number, but 15 obtained other employment. And the reason I bring that up is I feel that possibility with that 7-week turnaround time, people are looking maybe for other jobs that are serious. And because of the delay, they've found another job and have jumped on that. 12 failed the polygraph, so they went in a polygraph, and out of those number of candidates that were in there, 12 failed. 3 failed the background check. 3 failed, they failed it because they lacked a driver's license. And 14 of those failed for just kind of a hodgepodge of different reasons, some of it for the physical piece. And within our process, we asked a question specifically about marijuana. Within that, the current rule is if they have used marijuana, if they admit they've used marijuana within the last 6 months, that's a reason not to move them forward. On the next slide, we have been tracking reasons when correctional officers, staff leave. We do an exit interview with them, and we've been collecting data based on trying to understand better for why they're leaving. And again, for this particular slide, we've been tracking that since 2019 to current date. So out of the 2 categories, you'll see the number of years, the number of employees. And then the other column is to kind of give you an idea on how many years of service those employees had working with the sheriff's office. So the very first one is kind of eye-opening, because 21 employees with an average year of service of 9 left due to the overtime and the force overs that we're currently experiencing. So one of the terms we hear a lot about is the work-life balance piece. Out of that, 11 people with 3 years of an average service left for other job opportunities. 9 people could not, so we've hired them, so these are people that we've hired and did not complete the FTO process. They got washed out, or they decided to leave prior to finishing that program. During the same period of time, 9 people left or resigned in lieu of facing discipline. 7 moved out of the area. 4 people retired. 4 due to medical reasons. And then 2 for involuntary termination, so fired them. Employees were fired. So that kind of gives you an overview of what we're looking at. Some things that we put together is moving forward, some concerns in terms of the recruitment, what we're finding for the recruiting process. One thing that we were notified by the Criminal Justice Academy that they are not doing a class in March of this year, which was scheduled.
Don, what was the reason for that?
They really didn't have one, and I don't think they explained it to you either.
Well, they did say that it's hard for them to staff the instructors, and the instructors get a break, in other words. They just can't
The
get out.
academy instructors. So we're looking, right now, the next scheduled class is not until May. And again, keeping in mind that this is for all jail facilities that are all facing the same issues, so don't know what, they have a max number, and obviously one of the concerns is if we're lucky enough to get some people, whether or not they'll limit how many people we can put through.
Is it a possibility to run a double class in May, because you're skipping a class?
Not for the academy. They're not willing to do that. Well, they haven't offered that, I should say. Yes.
Don, when you talk about the class is aimed at training who? What position?
Yeah, so it's correctional. So the
This is just for
the correctional. Yeah, this is not for the, what we call the BLEPI or the law enforcement. This is strictly for the correctional. They generally put on 4 classes a year. And again, one of our kind of mark that we've been looking at is obviously summer's coming up, and summer's always a concern for us for staffing because people want vacations, et cetera. So even putting people in the May, we're gonna be up against the clock on that for people getting through and then getting into the FTO program. They will not be, they'll be into the summer months before they probably get signed off.
So what's their status between the time that they get an accepted application and they complete the academy and the FTO? What happens to them, or what are they doing?
So if I understand your question correct, if we hired them like today, what would we do with them?
Right.
We're struggling with that. We've talked about it. One of the things right now, the quick answer is we don't hire them until we get close to that time. And then the problem with that is they're apt to look and go someplace else. So,
What do other facilities do with them, do you know?
well, so if there's work to do, they could put them, but again, we're up, because we're ACA accredited, similar to the law enforcement side that's clear. You can't use them to do, you're very limited on what you can use them for. And we have tried that, but then it becomes, I'll refer to it as busy work. But you still need someone to oversee them and to work with them, and so that's another draw off of personnel. If you had hired someone and say you had them filing paperwork. Again, there's plenty of that to do, but is that a good use of the time? And then you still gotta train them to do that.
Got it.
Again, some of the things that you know, but we know that right now, public safety jobs are not the most desirable right now, given the climate. So this is one of the reasons why we think that we're seeing a slowdown in the application process. And our extended hiring process makes us a little bit less competitive with the overall market out there. Again, 7 weeks to go through a process.
Break that down by county. Do you know what York is doing?
So one of the controversies right now, or one of the differences, I should say, is York County, and actually I think all the other counties aren't doing a polygraph. The state doesn't do a polygraph. So a polygraph is a key component in terms of time. It takes time for the individual to fill out the paperwork, and then takes time for the polygraphist to review it, then you got to schedule, and of course the polygraphist is scheduling other polygraphs in there for other county employees that will go through a polygraph piece. So that's a component in terms of the delay. They're pretty much doing, I mean, they still do a background, now, what I don't know, I can't tell you specifically what other counties are doing for a background. I know ours is pretty thorough. Is there room to slim that down? Possibly. Again, I know one of the things that we've looked at in terms of the background is there are companies, this would be a cost, but there are companies that we could utilize that could do the background, and they would be strictly working for us, focused on this particular piece. The lieutenant that does these, again, he's handling all other sheriff's office background checks that comes through, so sometimes he does get pulled for more than one.
Sue, go ahead.
So, if we took out with the poly, okay, how much time would that free us up as far as getting that 7 weeks? So out of the 7 weeks, how much of that is the poly time? You know, we're getting with the questions out, you know, we're getting it back, we're getting it scheduled and the whole bit.
This is my guess,
Okay,
from 1 to 2 weeks.
I'm 1 to 2 weeks. And if we used an outside service out of that 7 weeks?
So again, some of the background piece is streamlined. So if you look at the background that we utilize now, and you look at the background that the company uses, it's a lot more streamlined. So they will say that they will get back to us within 2 to 5 days. The reason for the way that they've explained it, if in the background additional information comes up, it may prolong, but if you have someone, again, some of our candidates are 19, 20, they're young, so they don't have a lot of work history or whatever, it could be streamlined a little bit better. So, again, depending on how busy the lieutenant is and everything else, that could streamline, that could save another week potentially, or at least a few more days.
Okay, okay,
I-
yeah, no,
Don,
go
I have a
ahead.
I have a question. Out of the 16 counties, how many do you know have dropped polygraph for correction?
To my knowledge, no one's using, including the state, is the poly. It's not required. It is not mandated by the academy, it's not mandated by the law, or it's something that we've been doing here in the county since I've been here.
So, Neil, I have a question, and maybe this is an HR question. So, with the lieutenant who's doing the background checks, is he also doing it for the other employees of the county? And how many other employees of the county have we hired or are in the process that have gone through that on a continuous basis? That's what putting a real hamper on how fast he's getting, you know, what people through.
You're talking about non-law enforcement candidates?
Yes. Or, well,
Or both?
combination, you know, how many, you know, law enforcement people, you know, are applying for jobs and that amount of work, and how many of the other county offices where that, you know, that they have the potential there for, you know, people to go through the lieutenant.
Is my understanding, and I don't think anything has changed, that the lieutenant that does it for the sheriff's office, which would include law enforcement, the jail, but it also includes the civilian, if any civilian positions
Okay, yeah.
that fall into that. They have traditionally always done the background.
Do we
But-
have a
but
lot of
then-
civilians going through that? Because I don't see a lot of new hires, or am I not?
Sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, Don, no non-union employee up in the courthouse or deeds or assessing
Correct. No,
goes down
it's
through there as a.
strictly
It
the-
is
the
strictly law
sheriff.
Strictly law.
enforcement,
Doesn't do
jail.
communications, doesn't
Okay.
do.
Oh, so it's strictly law enforcement, okay, got you.
Commu-
got you.
Sheriff's.
Communications?
He does not do communications. I know the polygrapher was, but then when we had the change, I think they outsourced. I don't think they've come back to our polygrapher.
Is there a polygraph required for the communication center?
I think so. Yes, yeah,
Thank you.
yes.
It went back and forth. They weren't doing one for a while, and then I believe there was a law change
Yep. Last session.
Yeah.
to put that in there.
So there's a legal requirement?
A legal
Some of it has to do
allowance,
with
a legal allowance.
it has to do with the access, the intelligence, the information they have access to.
And of course, the polygraph is very efficient in making sure that people don't get access that shouldn't have it, right?
At the moment, it shows whether or not they did. Moving forward, not so much.
I believe it, of course.
The next slide just are some thoughts on concerns in terms of our retention. our overall retention. So again, since 2020, we've had a 50% of our correctional officers hired have left since we've hired in 2020. 6 to 8 correctional officers, we're told, are currently in the process of finalizing other career opportunities. That information has come from the NEDQ staff. Again, a lot of that has to do with what the current status of the jail in terms of the work-life balance and the force overs. Generally speaking, right now, the jail has a deficit of 3 staff per shift, and that's based on a vacation liability. Coming in June, could increase. Again, this is just some demographics. Again, we wanted to look at we're always looking at what could happen in the future. So one of the things in looking at it, we have 10 correctional staff who are over the age of 60, and why is that important? Important is because they're eligible to retire within the next year. So there's a potential for another 10 people retiring in 2023 into 2024, which will again potentially add to our staffing issues. Another thing that we know about, because NEDQ did share with us, for example, Androscoggin County just signed a 3-year contract. We know that this is going on throughout the state, so similar to our discussions with the patrol contract, we're seeing that competition is going to increase our discussions if wages are going up at other counties. I'm sure that will be something that we are all hearing from the unions. So the next slide, it's a question I can't answer, but I put it up because I think it's important, and it is what is the FTE, the full-time employee level, where we can no longer operate the jail. Based on, we have a certain population, inmate population, versus the population of employees. What is that number? So that's my part of the HR presentation. I know Alex is gonna go on to the budget, but we can either wait till the end, but if you have any questions.
I'd just like to know what today's census is of corrections officers and what the inmate count is at the jail at the moment.
I think Alex has that.
Right there.
I second.
Is there anything else before we go on now?
Launch into it.
Okay, I'm gonna sort of pick up from this, and before we go too far down this, one of the things that I really want to reiterate as we go through the budget process is, while from a budget perspective, things might get worse before they get better, we as the county really need to be prepared to spend what needs to be spent to get ourselves out of this hole, to accept some deficit spending that's probably going to be coming our way, but also to have a plan at the end of it so that we can reach an eventual new sustainable budget for the jail. And what I want to sort of talk about is just how far away we are from the old budget that used to exist for this jail right now. And I think that's going to really sort of jump out of the page here. So this comes back to Commissioner Cloutier's question. The jail's budget is for 189 employees, 128 corrections officers, right down the list. The next line you see there is the active. Now, those are the people who are technically employees of the county at the moment. So that's what we would define as active. And you can see the big hole there is on corrections officers, less so in other positions. And it's really important to make mention of the fact those other positions transport the other jail positions. Sergeants, they're in the perimeter, filling those shifts to keep the place running. They're batting out of position right now in order to keep things rolling. They're really a big part of why the place is still having the lights on right now. But you can see, it's 105 versus 189. That next line is the available line. So that's the people who are not out on FMLA, who are truly able to come in next morning and work. And in any case, in any employer, you're always gonna have something of a gap there. But when we're getting so close to the bone here, and in fact, some would say, into the bone, that 7-person gap between active and available becomes absolutely critical, and so that's why we include that. So it's, this isn't numbers that we haven't been bandying about, but I also want to use it from that budget perspective to show that's very, very far from what we originally anticipated. Any questions on that one? Okay. Okay, next question was going to be the inmates per day. The budget, and this number's been around for a very long time, and the budget is that 456. That's been basically the same number since I've been here. The active count as of, I believe it was Wednesday of last week, is 231. That's actually a little higher than it's been typically. Most days it's been in the low 200s. So, running at right about half of what that original capacity is. That being said, and I think this is a really important point to make here, that 456 number, the jail hasn't had that many inmates in there in about 7 years. In about 15, 16, at the very last days of the Board of Correction, the jail was getting up to that point, although a lot of those inmates were boarders from other counties and federal borders. So there's been a decline in the number of inmates over time that's just gotten particularly extreme at this point in time. So those are those pieces. But then we're going to switch over to the other side of the equation a little bit, because we can all see fewer inmates, fewer employees. It's a jail running at a reduced rate from what it would initially be. Well, that's also now applying on the revenue side. The original budget for the prior year was for 54 federal and ICE inmates per day on average, and that's where that number comes in. That's actually, compared to historical trends, it's a little below what the normal average would be, but sort of a playing it safe. As of right now, it is 1 to 2. They are ICE inmates who are just there briefly, typically due to some need to keep them separated from some other facility. There are no what we would think of as federal marshal inmates in the jail at all right now. So right out of the gate, you see that 2,575 number versus rough guess of $125,000. So that's obviously a pretty huge hole that now exists. So this is just, again, further illustration of just how far the jail is from what would in the past have been considered normal operations. So that's sort of next snapshot piece on this. So where this leaves the jail, and the numbers that you're going to see up here, this active number that I've got there, I should have said actual, and now I'm suddenly realizing, great, thanks, Alex, shows the original budget for the jail on a monthly basis, obviously intended to break even, 1.867 in revenues coming in, 1.867 in expenses going out, it breaks even. As of the last 4 months, and this is since the federal borders were gone, this is what the numbers look like. So that's going to be September, October, November, December. It's basically running $300,000 per month below on the revenues and below on the expenses for what is essentially still breaking even, but at a vastly diminished capacity than it was before. And so that's literally where we are today and where things land. One might wonder why that expenses number hasn't, the revenue number coming down is pretty obvious, right? It's those borders. It's also the fact that our state funding is declining because of the lower inmate count. So there's a lot of things going on there. The other issue, though, is why haven't the expenses gone down even further? well, yes, there's reduced amounts on wages, but a lot of the other expenses aren't necessarily going down as proportionally. One you're looking at right there is the yearly food budget, which looks right now like it's gonna come in almost exactly on budget. But if it's coming in almost exactly on budget with the population and the staff down so low, it speaks to problems ahead, right? Because we know what's going on there. We know that food costs have gone through the roof. And they are doing what they can for the folks in there to make things a little better. But we know that that's a number that's gonna balloon up when those populations return. And I'm taking the optimistic approach that eventually we can find out the way out of this and eventually find enough things to be done to bring back employees and start the ball rolling there. So the other thing that's also coming in about on budget is the medical budget. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is they've done a little better at actually getting and keeping their staffing. The other piece, though, is they're having to pay a premium for that staff. And the cost per inmate in terms of the medical is definitely continuing to go up and up and up. So that's also a potential future looming problem. So that's where we are today, right? Like it's shrunk down to this much smaller entity. Now, what immediately comes up is next steps here, and this is sort of the critical thing and the part where I think everyone just needs to be on board with what's gonna come next. Before intake can start fully functioning, we're going to need to get back corrections officers. And in order to get back more corrections officers, we're going to need to do things to make that more attractive to them, speed up the process. That's gonna involve spending money to get to that place. Then when that occurs, it's gonna take even more staffing to get to back where we can start taking boarders again. That's all gonna create deficit spending. And we need to be able to get to a place where we can live with that if we know what the plan at the end is going to be. That's what we really need here, is we need to have a sense for what the end result is going to be and how long it's gonna take to get there. And knowing that all things are uncertain in this world, that's what's gonna come next here. We will have that ability to get that deficit spending in order to build out of this, but there's gonna have to be a plan at the end of it.
Alex, just a question, not to disrupt too much. It's obvious we're gonna have to increase benefits and wages again, but this is on top of, in the last calendar year, we've done that by a pretty healthy margin, trying to attract candidates, right?
We have done a number of things, and it has come up a bunch. However, so has the rest of the world. So that's really where the struggle lies. And in particular, there's a number of thoughts that HR has put out there in terms of things that can be done for recruitment, for retention, and we've got to take a long, hard look at those things, because, well, we go back to those with those numbers and those counts, like, you know, you can't help but look at that and see that something's got to occur here.
What's the maximum jail population allowed?
What was that?
584.
584?
So
But
what that would
reality,
be-
like they mentioned, it's been years, right?
Yeah,
Well, 584 would be rock and roll in that.
Right.
Even if
Yeah.
you had the staff.
you're right.
Right.
And the big limiter there, even if you did have the staff, would then become medical. Because until that, this was a topic that, gosh, 7, 8 years ago would start coming up when we would be talking about using some of the vacant pods for other but similar uses, is immediately our folks on the medical end started saying, hey, we're gonna need beefed up medical before we can start taking that kind of inmate. So that's why that remains such a critical piece to it. It's always been an undersized piece of the jail, and it's just getting more and more extreme over time. Yeah.
Oh, Alex, even if we would beef up, with the new recruits, to get people in there, the problem I see is that once they get in there, we need to have enough staff, to do with the training. So you can, what you can, hire 30 people or whatever, but do we have enough staff inside with the jail to train those people? When there's, when there's an issue, you can, like we can talk all we want, with how are we gonna get, staff in there, to work, but you need more bodies in there to teach with this staff, because that's part of the problem. Some of them are leaving, is that correct? Maybe, I'm assuming, because with this, with training and, and stuff of that, when there's not enough staff and enough time there?
There was a time in the fall that we were receiving a number of resignations saying that they were all committed, but they were not committed after being left alone 2 or 3 days. And so there were probably 3 or 4 individuals that gave us resignations similar to that language.
So where do we will concentrate on, To get more bodies in there, but if you don't have enough of bodies in there to train with these bodies, it's kind of like, I don't
Well,
know.
the jail has shifted gears, and they have addressed that issue that we were having in the fall.
Okay.
However, what they're faced with now is the lack of numbers of existing employees stepping forward to be a field training officer.
Right,
And
yeah.
so those numbers are down, so that hamper bringing in a number of new recruits into the jail and training them at once.
Do we have more?
Last slide.
Last slide, and this is just an interesting case of it. There's a monetary hit to it, but in many ways, I'd almost want to focus more on sort of the interesting thing that's occurred here. The funding that we were initially budgeting in the prior year from state funding was $3.7 million, which was based on the county having about 18% of inmates statewide, which was actually a little bit below the 20% mark that it would typically run, which would, to a certain extent, make sense. 20% of population, 20% of inmates. When you look at 21-22, you notice it drops down to 17.2%, which causes a hit on the state funding as well. Best guess for 2022-23 is that it'll be 16%, which causes further drop in the state funding. That's all dependent on what the other jails do. The key, and I think the interesting thing here, is just how much of an impact this has had, where the jail's population, as it has shrunk down, has hit a point now where it's become a smaller percentage of the overall state population, and even sort of noticeably different than a lot of the other places where inmates versus percentage of state population tend to be relatively similar to each other. So I just want to end with just the key piece here, that it's going to take some pain to pull back out of this. We've just got to commit to doing it, have that plan. Personally, what I would love to see is there is also an opportunity here, with it being so far down in staff, further specialization on who goes back into the jail as the jail starts to repopulate, and what positions come back on as there. I think that assuming that budget from the prior years, that 456, those counts, is something that we should aspire to return back to, doesn't really feel like the right solution here. There needs to be work with the employees, with the unions, to find a better, newer path forward, because we're never going to get that opportunity, like right now, to rethink what this thing is in the future. And so there is an opportunity there. That being said, assuming we get up from the bottom of the well.
Jim?
I was sitting here thinking just about that. The hotel industry has something called RevPAR, which is revenue per available room. And theoretically, we had about 250 rooms when the state corrections people, when this was first built, said, oh, those could be doubles. And so all of a sudden, we're much closer to 500. I confess I have no idea what a typical or consistent with other measures jail population would be in a place like Cumberland County, and whether 200 or 400 is the right result from all of that. I'm of course aware that Maine has a relatively low incarceration rate, which I always thought was pretty good. But it seems obvious to me that we can't just turn the key, write a bigger check, and all of a sudden enlarge our operations very much. We don't have the personnel. We probably have the money now. We may not have it forever. And it may not be appropriate. It may not be a good community response, and it may not be a good law enforcement response. So I do think, and I think that's a good thing for a discussion tonight. What are we trying to do here? I mean, what's the point? With 200 inmates, how many corrections officers do you actually need? And what's the configuration, given that building, given the responsibilities that are being undertaken here? What's the configuration of what people do each day that we want to think is going to work? And do we need more? We probably do. How many more, and what are they going to do? You know, it sounds like we're not going to get more for a while. And frankly, I've said it before here, and I'm thinking quite a few of the people in the room already have heard it from me several times. I think we shoot ourselves in the foot down there every single day. You know, 7 weeks to get a job that nobody wants? It's crazy. That's nuts. It doesn't work. And we can, not only can we imagine that it won't work, we got the proof. So somebody tell me what to do next. That's.
Do you have comments or questions? No. Well, I will, I'm along with what Jim is kind of driving at. How do you make a silk purse out of a sow's ear? And where we're down so many prisons or incarcerates, we might want to explore turning the jail into and recognize it more as a detention center. And what I mean by that is that when people come into it, if there's a way to divert them to appropriate service or appropriate services, because they're really not the criminal element, this might be the time to try to develop and do that. The more we put in, I think the harder it will be. And I realize the effort to do that would be probably out of our reach. But when you think of the number of people that are there that need mental health attention, you think of the people that are there that need real services and substance abuse. And then there are actually some, I believe, that are brought in just because of homelessness. If there were a way to divert them before they go through the whole booking area of the judiciary system, that would help unload the courts too. But it's just that we've got to start thinking and taking advantage of the situation that we got with the decreased population. Certainly the three things that I mentioned, mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, if you were to address each one of those, you would never build them or aim the people like them to be housed in a jail, and how that's designed.
It's clear to me that we've had these discussions ongoing for weeks, sometimes months, that we need to reduce that 7-week application process. We need to find a way to do it. We need to find a way to do it promptly. And if that means eliminating polygraph, we have to give it very serious consideration. And in the academy thing, we don't control that, but is there a way to do in-house academy training? With that, and, you know, we can't sit around and do nothing until May. So, you know, we've got to act now, it seems to me. Sue?
I agree with everything that's been said here, but I think that before that we can start to go down the road, there's a lot of questions that need to be always answered, and they need to be answered strongly. And with the sheriff not here tonight, you know, to answer some of these questions, I don't know if his staff, you know, can do it. Well, my recommendation would be to the board is that we send a letter, you know, to the sheriff with the questions, you know, that we have, and ask him, you know, to define it and come back to us for the March meeting, because we can't continue to kick the can. And Neil, we've been talking about this with jail issue for years, not just months or weeks. And some of the stuff that, you know, like the process, I think some of it, you know, it needs to be changed. And it's like, I think what Don, in one of your slides, somebody was let go because they didn't have a driver's license. I don't understand that. Why do you have to have a driver's license? You know, I mean, is that necessarily a real important, you know, part of the process? With that, in order to be a corrections officer, that you need a driver's license? I don't know. So I think that what I would like to do is to see this board here would draft a letter with Neil and Jim, and we send it to the sheriff, and we ask these questions, and we, you know, would like to report, you know, back on, you know, well, March the 13th at our next meeting. Because we can't continue, you know, to try to fix with staffing and all that if this hiring process isn't going to be fixed.
So I have a question about that. Do we believe that the existing staff is sufficient? And if it is not sufficient, how far less than sufficient is it to operate a jail that has 220 inmates?
I think we have a very good staff, but we just don't have enough of it.
Well,
You know?
that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
You know.
is, if we're short for what we have in there right now, by
Right.
what, to what degree are we short? In other words, the 185 corrections officers, or whatever that number was, is based on 450 inmates. And we haven't had 450 inmates for quite a while.
Yes, I do think there's a really important clarification to be made there, though. The existing inmate count at the jail is low because of limitations on the ability to take in new inmates.
Right.
If it wasn't for that, the number would almost certainly be a higher number. So it hasn't landed at that low number just all on its own.
All right, so
Huge difference there, yeah.
I do have an opinion about that. My opinion is, if you get picked up for a misdemeanor in Harrison or
Yeah.
Bridgeton, the chances that you got, well,
More
yeah.
likely Casco.
Yeah, Casco, for
There's no
instance.
crime in Casco, is there, guys?
You're not gonna get a ride to the county jail. But if you get picked up on Oak Street in Portland, then that's the drop-off. You know, I think we've seen that pattern existing before. It might be that, and we have the district attorney here who likely would have an opinion about this too. It might be that we just say, well, we do not think that is a good expenditure of public resources to incarcerate somebody for a misdemeanor over a weekend, especially since we know that they're gonna be released without a charge on Monday morning. You know, that has been going on for a long time. Especially when a cruise ship comes to town.
And globally, if the reality is we're a 300-person or 325-person jail, then we need to make take the steps and make the decisions to implement that. Are we ever gonna be a 450 inmate jail again?
To your point, Neil, in looking at it as a business, we have an asset down there which we can't take advantage of because we don't have the manpower. And Alex's figures show that. If we could put that number in and get people that, from the federal government and assigned to us, it would help our cash flow. That's certainly one way to look at it.
I wonder whether, I know Alex has got very little to do from day to day. I wonder whether we could have a financial synopsis of existing conditions. You know, assuming that the current revenues continue for a few months at least, or the rest of our current budget, and the revenues as you expect them to actually exist.
Certainly. I haven't put in January. I went September. September was the first month in which boarding revenues were essentially down to a zero. It took a few months for it to wean off, which is why I started using September as the benchmark for it. But I can certainly add in January, and we'll be into February before you know it.
And if we could get, as part of that, it's a simple math that I can't do, the state support for RevPAR, you know, the daily, I know the federal number is about 132 a day. The state number, based on what they're producing, do you happen to know what that is, or?
It's not actually based on a per inmate count. It's sort of, there's a single pot that gets divided out amongst the counties based on their share of average daily inmates.
So if we knew what that number per inmate per day was, that would be good.
Yes, it'll vary depending on whether or not the state as a whole has more or less inmates in the course of a year.
Yeah, but we're looking for I'm looking for an order of magnitude kind of
Yeah,
thing, so that would
I
be,
can absolutely get you that.
thanks.
And globally, this might be putting the cart before the horse, but what is the amount of resources we have to dedicate to get out of this hole?
And I think that's where we desperately need a plan of attack. We need, because right now we know it's going to exist, and we know that it's going to exist for some time, because again, first there are more employees needed to reopen intake. Then once that's done, you need more employees to get to a place where you can start reopening areas for federal borders. So we're a couple of jumps short here before things start to catch up. And in the process of catching up, particularly if it takes the form of wage increases, that's going to create a higher sort of, well, what happens if this all works kind of thing, which is where that plan at the end and that end point for this, you know, basically the answer to the question of what does the jail look like if this all works, if we find a way to start attracting more positions and find a way to get out of this hole, what's that going to look like? And that's where I get back to that statement. I don't think it should be the budget for this jail of 10 years ago or the set of assumptions of 10 years ago. I think we can do better than that for the inmates, for the employees, for the people, for everyone. We can do better than that.
Clearly not 185, it's clearly not 454, but what's a real number? What's a realistic number?
Correct.
The other thing for our employee though is we've got to make sure that we put into it, because it's been brought forth from a hard fact, is quality of life. They've got to be able to enjoy quality of life.
Correct. And that's the best part of the what if this works, is that can be sort of a big part of it. That stops being the
Do-
number one issue.
I would be
We've got a
really,
long way to go.
I'd be interested in understanding what the opportunity for improvement in our circumstances ends up being if we identify as a goal reintroducing federal inmates. You know, you know, if you have to force over three corrections officers every night because you have that additional cost and problem, then we need to understand that we're doing that and we're doing it on purpose. You know, so that, and we need to understand why, so. I mean, that's, I think, I will have to say too, I would be glad to hear if the chair would allow it, from anybody on the sheriff's staff here, what the state of thinking has been and is, and from the people on the ground down there. You know, it's just, I mean, I look at this and it's like a train out of control for the last 2 or 3 years. You know, we've been watching it and knowing that it's gonna,
Crash.
well, we were hoping somebody would fix the tracks, but it didn't happen so far.
Naldo, yeah, I was gonna, your insights, thoughts, comments, Arwell?
Do we,
Two comments.
do we want him to go up to the podium so we can hear?
No, Mike, I don't think.
Oh.
There you go. Thanks, Don.
You know, two of the frustrations, first one being the hiring process, the length of time it takes to hire somebody. It's not our staff that's the holdup, it's the candidate who won't get us the paperwork that we're requesting. They have to have a social security card, they have to have all those documents that HR has to collect. Then they send the application to me. I screen it the first day, lieutenant gets it the same day usually, and usually he has a turnaround is 1 to 2 days. It's not the background that's the holdup. It's the candidate to come in and do the things that we've been asking them to do. That's the frustration that I see. The candidates are not responsive to get the job moving faster. Truly, if somebody did everything immediately the way we asked them to do, I would dare say we could get it down to 4 to 5 weeks. But we're never gonna, without the cooperation of the candidate, you're not gonna narrow it down. The next thing to attract candidates from outside the county. When I see an applicant from Portland apply, or somebody within the reasonable travel distance that applies, we're on them. If I see somebody that's outside the county for 2 hours distance drive, they can't afford to live here. I had one kid come from Rhode Island, lasted 3 days, couldn't find housing, went back to Rhode Island. There's several of those candidates that I could tell you, a whole list of them that didn't come because there's no affordable housing for what the pay is. But if they're in the area already, I get pretty excited about those folks. So housing is another issue.
So, Nolo, can I ask you, do you have in your own mind, or does somebody down there have in their own mind, what the optimum outcome would be for this hiring process? I mean, frankly, I'm kind of used to, we have job X. We've told everybody, come on down on Wednesday, and, you know, sometime Wednesday night, we're gonna start offering the job.
Yeah.
And I know that's probably foreign to what you guys are able to do, but you know, that's the kind of speed we're looking for.
Right, but
You know?
there's a lot of back and forth between what we want and for them to respond. Like, we need your social security card, and then they got, some people have to go and order a new one, you know, for crying out loud. They don't even have it.
Yeah, but you don't need the card in order to write down the
Nope,
number.
we don't, we
Yeah.
don't.
So,
But, you know, a lot of that slows down the process, the back and forth, back and forth. It's, you know, don't blame the employees, you know, it's the candidates that slow it down more than ever. The quickest I've ever hired anybody is 4 weeks. That's the quickest.
But would that 4 weeks be 2.5 weeks if we eliminated the polygraph, yeah?
That's a very dangerous thing to, I'll tell you one candidate.
Why are 15 other counties doing it? I mean, the problem is,
But this-
we have a crisis, you know, what's the least disruptive thing to do to solve that problem? maybe, is it possible to, I don't know.
This is one of the candidates that I'll really hang my hat on. Had a guy apply, and he was security at a university out of state, but he lives in Maine. He's talk about top-notch guy. I was wanting him so fast, we gave him a tour of the jail. He was really interested, took the polygraph. I mean, he's squeaky clean, all the paperwork, take a polygraph. We find out that he hires drug-addicted prostitutes for sex. You want him working in your female pod? That's the kind of people that we're weeding out.
Well, we're 160 or 90, whatever the first slide said, applicants, and 3 of them were washed out with the polygraph. It was a little under 2%. There is a process for relieving people of their responsibilities after they've been hired, if
yeah.
you discover things that,
It's a snapshot.
the chances are that the polygraph would actually successfully create an issue. Appears to be fairly small. But that's, I mean, frankly, when I hear the state police isn't doing anything with that, you know, those people have got the glare of the Klieg lights on them when anything goes wrong out on the road. So it's like, you know, they must have some confidence that their ongoing internal affairs process and their ongoing supervisory process will help them understand the circumstances of their staff. So, I mean, frankly, it's kind of tough to talk about it tonight because we know that we can't stuff them into an academy for like 8 weeks, maybe 10. So, I mean, that means we're not gonna hire anybody for the next 3 months.
Well, right now, we don't have anybody to send to the academy. We have 2 in the wings. Hopefully, we'll have them hired before May, but they're still waiting on them, not us.
So, and if we turn, if we turn the hiring process into a sign-up session on a Tuesday, we can't put them on the job for months, right?
Right. And we've had those. Nobody comes.
So,
You go to job fairs, nobody comes to visit our desk, you know.
I guess my question, Aldo, is there thinking down at the jail among the command staff and the supervisors, we could fix this if we did blah, blah, blah? What's the blah, blah, blah? Is there anything?
But if, let's say we had 6 or 8 people apply and we had them hired, our guys would pitch in and do our own academy. We would buckle down and do our own, and we would. But to take all that staff to do 1 or 2 members, you might as well wait for the next academy. But if we could get 6, 8 people on all at once, we would have our own academy.
So,
Everybody would promise they would buckle down and do it ourselves, and we prefer to do it.
I'm sorry, I got one last question. The accreditation of the jail, can somebody summarize for us how these current circumstances might affect the accreditation? Is it gonna make compliance easier, more difficult, about the same?
Here's the guy.
So Commissioner, the challenges that we're dealing with is across the country. Staffing is, you're lucky to keep a staff person for 3 years. That's the norm now in the business. People don't care about pensions, they don't care about benefits. It's an ugly situation. These are challenges that we have. I think when you talk to about the population, what it's gonna be, it'll probably be about 325. Your nonviolent offenders, correct, should be diverted in a non-custody setting. So, you know, the spotlight of, the snapshot of 9, 9's is a conservative number. I'm saying about 15, 16. If you don't have that by June, you're in trouble. We can collapse posts, but you're not gonna have the man hours with the mandatory overtime with your current staff to cover it. The federal inmates, yeah, there's certain things that are gonna be required for us to get more than 2 or 3. Again, that comes down to staff. So,
Suggestions for a solution?
in-house academy, absolutely. You need 10 bodies before June. That's the bottom line. You know, we can collapse posts, accreditation, some posts that we could use online, absolutely. It's just, for accreditation, they're a little more lenient because of the current trend across the country. They won't be that way the next time around.
Yeah, so that was kind of my question, I
Yeah.
guess. In terms of like suicide watch and all these other extra intense, more intense activities, are you confident that that's being addressed fully?
I do. I think the current medical vendor and the mental health staff that we have down there are sufficient. I think they give, they're very diligent with every offender that comes into the facility. Again, we're dealing with the mental health issue in the community. Basically, they come into jail. And, you know, there's a few things we could be doing too when it comes to activities. But again, this comes down to staff.
Thanks.
Appreciate your insight.
No problem.
Jackie, do you have a perspective? I know your hand was up there when,
I do, and I'll be really brief. First, I'm Jackie Sartoris. I'm really honored to be the District Attorney of Cumberland County, and it's nice to meet those of you around the table I have not met before. I do have a little bit of perspective on our current situation from the prosecution side, which is I don't think that we're going to go back to a time when we see inmates being held normatively for, in the kind of bail being set the way we used to before the pandemic. And I think two things kind of collided, which has changed the situation that we're going to see, I think, for not just the foreseeable future, but for the long term. We used to have inmates picked up and held in jail kind of normatively for a number of things. And what's happened in the last couple of years, first because of the pandemic, and then eventually here in Cumberland County because it was harder and harder to know that we had space at the jail available, is that I think both our bail commissioners and judges have realized that there are a lot of crimes, the nonviolent misdemeanor crimes, that we are no longer going to, they were no longer going to have bail actually required to hold them in jail overnight or 2 days. I would love to know, Don, if you have numbers, and I'm certainly not right now, but I'm sure, I would guess that the number of inmates who are held for small periods of time has gone further and further down over the last 3 years since the start of the pandemic. And I think that's because the sort of picked up Friday night because you're, you know, out drunk doing whatever, held over a couple of days. I don't think that's happening very much anymore. And again, for those two reasons, there has been a bail movement across the country to say that we should not be holding people in jail normatively, that creates its own kind of trauma for people who otherwise maybe are not going to benefit for public safety to be held. Whether you agree with that bail reform movement or not, it's very clear that bail reform is something that we're seeing here on a day-to-day basis with the folks who are being picked up. They're often being PR'd, they're often being, you know, not held at all and just given a summons for an arraignment date. So I don't think we can expect to return to the sort of business model, if you will, that we had 5 years ago. Having said that, I do also think that there are some real opportunities right now. I like to think of a crisis as an opportunity because really you don't have a choice, right? We can't try to build back what we had 4 years ago because a lot of things have changed. People's tolerance for incarceration in our society has changed. Incarceration is being looked at increasingly as what should be a last resort, not a sort of front-end resort for people who've been found outside of the law, except for in situations of violence. I think there was a comment made that we're a low incarceration state. We are a low incarceration state. We are a very high incarceration nation. And in the international scenario, Maine's incarceration rates are very high. We are about 4 times higher than most of our nearest westernized nations because they're doing things quite differently. So I think if you're looking at what we want to be, and I think that that's the question that Alex and Stephen, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Cloutier have also talked about, I think this is the right opportunity to look at where do we want to be when we grow up? Who do we want to be in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years? This generation, I happen to have kids in their 20s, they are a very purpose-driven generation. They want to know that the work they do has value. And they also want work-life balance on top of it. And right now, I think being a corrections officer is a really hard sell for this generation. If what I'm doing instead is what a lot of other facilities outside of Maine are doing, which is actually have a mental health facility that I can be released into, which is a secure facility, a substance use facility which does treatment, which I can be released to, bailed to. A lot of these places are converting their former jails to these kinds of dormitory situations that provide treatment. So and then you're not just hiring corrections officers, you're also hiring treatment personnel, counselors, people who can help you reintegrate into the community. I know that that sounds really pie in the sky from where we are now, but the fact is we have a lot of empty space and need to figure out the right mission for us to get from here to there. I need treatment facilities. I can tell you as a prosecutor, there's a 5 or 4, sometimes if we're lucky, month wait for Wellspring, for other treatment facilities. Other communities outside of Maine are taking folks who need treatment, releasing them into a secure former jail facility often, and their bail conditions are to get treatment for those first 30 days, then to start the community integration process thereafter, and if they violate their bail conditions, then there's a bail hearing and they can be sent back to jail. Again, I know that's not the model that we're doing right now. So many places are across the country because they're realizing that jail, the way that we have traditionally done it, is not helping these people and therefore not really helping the community. So that's my vision for where I'd like to see us in the long run. There are other places doing this work now. They're way ahead of us though in terms of schedule. You know, these places have been 4 years in the making, 10 years in the doing in some places. But I really think it's time for us to stop looking at our county situation and be informed by what these other places are doing. This is the right time to put a committee together that does that work and comes up with the plan for who we want to be in 5 years and then figures out what steps there are we need to get there. Last comment I would just make, when I, many years ago, worked after law school during a summer, the law firms had a process where they would send us out to nonprofits until we started our internships. If you've got people who can be hired and need a paycheck, I don't know, rather than do busy work, I would suggest you have an agreement with a bunch of nonprofits to have them volunteer there, get a paycheck before they can be trained. That way we can hold on to them before they take a job elsewhere. They get the paycheck, we know they're doing meaningful work, it's part of our purpose-driven future, and then they're ready to queue up when it's time to actually send them for their training program. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I don't, you know, I have looked at some of these programs around the country and been really excited about them because they fill a need that as a prosecutor, I really need right now. I've got people recommitting in Cumberland County over and over and over again, minor crimes, not getting the help they need, and you know, it's creating a big backup of cases. And the one thing I need is secure treatment facilities for some of these folks, and we just don't have them.
Sue?
We, several years ago, maybe 5, 7 years ago, we looked at that option with the state. The state turned us away. So, I mean, you've got to get, well, more than just us, the sheriff's office, and you involved. You got to get the state involved because I don't know how many hours that we spent on that, and to come up with a plan, and, you know, they even, what came down, looked over with the jail, because we had with some empty pods and said, oh, no, well, this isn't gonna work, because you can't put these people into with this kind of situation. You know, it's a jail situation, it looks like a jail, and, you know, this isn't right, and that isn't right, so, we went down that road.
And that was
We-
when we had the community corrections building
That's right,
available.
and we were shut down.
So
From
if
the
I
state.
could just, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
I am, share your frustration.
Yeah.
I will tell you that a lot's changed in the last 5 years. York County, for example, has planned to use a facility similar to the community corrections facility. They gave up on getting funding from the state, recognizing that the state is just not interested. I had a similar conversation with a fairly high-level official who said, that's a county issue. There is some federal funding available through some of the substance use treatment programs. I think that if you put together a working group to just suss this out quickly, is it doable? How can it be paid for? How does it get staffed? I do not think you're talking about a lot of time to revisit where we were 5 years ago and where we are now, and to see how long it would take us to be there. And I would just suggest to you that at some point, York County is going to do this. They put the planning in place. They are not getting state money. They're gonna do it anyway. At some point, this is a best practice, and people in Cumberland County are gonna ask us why it's not available here. So I think that would be my request. I understand that this is hard. It's hard to envision how we get from where we are now to there. But I want to think that this is an opportunity to really envision what the future can look like, given that we have a deficit of corrections officers, and I don't see that that is going to turn around rapidly enough. Because it's true. People don't want these jobs as they are seen right now. We'd have to envision something quite different. We are about 3 times the incarceration rate of Canada. I will simply maintain that I don't think Canadians are 3 times nicer than we are. They do it differently.
They are very nice.
They are very nice, but that's the accent, don't be fooled, kidding. I do think, though, that we have other models out there, and they offer us a lot of hope, not just for what our jail system can look like, but for the fact that these folks end up better able to be community members who will not need incarceration or criminal legal system involvement in the future. It's a lot of work to get us there. There's a whole social safety net that I think a lot of us know is a little frayed around the edges at times. Unfortunately, we're the kind of court of last resort in a lot of ways for those folks who've needed help right along.
Yes, Jim?
I will say it's, although that would be a good outcome in my estimation, the funding for the county and for these operations is basically the property tax. And as you, I'm sure know, that's a regressive tax. And it is impinging on the property, the home crisis that we have. I mean, the thumbnail estimate of how far short we are in Cumberland County of housing is probably 6,000 or 8,000 units. Hundreds of millions of dollars of investment needed in order just to do that, just to address that. So, unless, I mean, we really do have to point at the state. The state has a surplus. They don't always have a surplus. Sometimes they like to reduce their tax rates or spend their money on other things. But, you know, this crisis is not just a Cumberland County crisis. And you know, as Sue pointed out, we thought we had a pretty good solution, and we had half of the managerial cohort of the Department of Human Services visiting our empty jails, cells for a couple of months, and apparently the governor's office at that time was the source of the edict that would never happen. And never happened was what had happened. So we need state participation. We couldn't possibly put a program like that on the property tax without a much broader consensus that that's what people want. then,
The
No,
the
that-
people who qualify do qualify for main care if they're not incarcerated. So they're bailed to the facility, they do qualify for main care. So I do think it's worth at least, I think it's worth at least running the numbers. I know York is doing it, so, or is planning, I think the information is that they're sort of doing it now in their existing facility, but really going to do it all the way in this, in their new plan, but that's a couple of years
You know
away.
that?
Thank you.
They're constructing facility. But it's what, I forget, it's maybe 50 beds or something like that. In York. In York, yeah. That's where they dedicated some of their APRA funds.
okay.
Alex and Jim, other closing comments?
I guess, just in closing, I think that the commissioners see that nothing is running normal down at the jail, from staffing to finance. And I heard one commissioner say this is the time, this is kind of like the low point that we have in the jail, and this is the time that we need to look at really analyzing the jail and what we want the jail to be for the county in the next 5, 10 years. It's truly a time for the jail to evolve. What we did 5, 10, 15, even 20 years ago is how this jail budget is structured, and it's 2023. We need to move into 2023 with this jail, and it's going to look much different than what it did just a few years back. Our hands are forced.
That model's broken.
This model, this budget is broken. And if things keep on going the way it's going, we're not only gonna have $2+ million in lost federal funds, but as Alex showed in that last slide, another 530,000 in state funds. So we're gonna be really behind the 8 ball, creating the budget come April to present to you in June. And so something needs to happen down at that jail, and something needs to happen fast. And the development of a plan from the sheriff's office is the first step.
So can you and I work on a letter to get it to Kevin?
Sure.
And post haste, and Aldo pass that on. You guys work on your responses, which we will need by the meeting, shortly before the meeting. It's only a month away from today, actually, 3/13. Commissioners, any other comments?
I have.
You always have
Well,
comments.
to
we know
say,
that.
to say we're at the bottom is only a reflection of where we've come. Where we're going next, we're not necessarily at the bottom.
Alex, any other comments?
No, I hope we're at the bottom, that's all.
We all do. Steve?
Yeah, one comment was, what's really bothering me is this polygraph test. Why can't that be made a condition of employment so that somebody can come in and get hired knowing that they're going to take a polygraph test within the next 6 months or 3 months or whatever?
Well, first a comment, I was corrected. There was, Two Bridges is currently using the polygraph also for pre-employment. So once they get hired, they become a union employee. And within the collective bargaining unit,
Yeah, but if that's a condition of them being employed,
it is currently. So currently, part of the condition of employment in the current process is they have to take and pass the polygraph.
but does it have to take place before they go on to the job, or can that be done later on? I mean, I guess that, I tossed that out as a thought, because my understanding is, from hearing from you, is that that's somewhere around a 2-week process. And if you could scrap that out of the system, then
I think it would be a potential liability hurdle. You hire someone, 3 months later you do a polygraph and you find out something really bad, and then you gotta terminate them. And then, so, they've been in there for 3 months. You make up the scenario in your head that, could something bad. I mean, is it possible? Yeah, I just don't, I'm trying to think of
just a
the,
thought.
yeah.
Yeah, the horrible incident that was uncovered is a crime, so it's not like yeah, there are limits to everything, of course.
Okay. I think that concludes the workshop, everyone. Thank you for your participation and comments, and we look forward to working with the jail staff and receiving the response, so we'll be the center. And I guess the focus, and maybe we plan that right now, Jim, is to have a lead-off workshop on the 13th, or is that going to be, if we have the sheriff's letter, can it actually be a meeting bullet point? How should we approach that?
I think a workshop, very similar to how we did, and allow the sheriff's office to present their plan if done.
Very good. Any other further direction or information you need from us, Naldo, other than the letter that Jim and I are going to put together? Okay, great.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments and input.
We take a 10-minute.
No, it's not going to be 10 minutes, it'll take a 2-minute break. We got a lot of business going on, but we can take a short break. I'll give you 3, okay?
You're gonna use yourself again at the meeting?
I guess should I?
Good evening. My name is Neil Jamison. I'm Chair of the Board of the Cumberland County Board of Commissioners, and I'm calling to order our February meeting. And those of you who would like to join us, please rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item of business is approval of the minutes from our January meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor of approving the January minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Informational report and presentations. Initially, I would like to introduce our new district attorney, Jackie Sartoris. And Jackie, please come to the podium and offer some comments.
Thank you so much. My name is Jackie Sartoris. Whoops, am I being too quiet?
I think it's on. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Jackie Sartoris. I am very honored to be the new district attorney for Cumberland County. I started my tenure on January 3rd. It is a 4-year term. Those of you who want to run have enough time to get ready and get started and go. In all seriousness, I am very honored to be the new district attorney. I was a prosecutor in Kennebec County for the last 4.5 years. Half of my job there was as the prosecutor for the treatment court, so I'm very familiar with a lot of the needs for both substance use and mental health so many of our defendants bring into the system. My entire prospect at this point in this work is to look at efficiencies that we can bring, but also to recognize that the current system often can't meet the needs of the folks who tend to be incarcerated, who tend to be in the criminal justice system. And so one of the first projects I'm working on is to develop a very robust presumptive diversion program for those folks with minor non-aggressive, non-violent misdemeanors, so that we can hopefully move people quickly out of the criminal legal system and into alternatives even before they are charged with a crime. That program is something that I've started to develop in just the last couple of weeks. You have terrific prosecutors and terrific staff who work for the district attorney's office. I was not familiar, except at the annual prosecutors conferences, which have been on Zoom the last couple of years until just this past October. I was really not familiar with the folks here in Cumberland County, the prosecutors or the staff. And I have to say, I've just been so honored to help head up the work that they do, because these are really fine folks across the board. We've not had a huge problem attracting folks to do the work in Cumberland County. In fact, we just had a position open up. I believe we had 22 people apply for the position of executive assistant for my job, and I'm really thrilled that I think we'll be able to secure someone in that position, hopefully before the end of this week. So I want to say thank you to the county for providing all the support that you provide. We do tremendously professional work. I think the people of Cumberland County are well served. However, we do know that the pandemic has resulted in a pretty persistent backlog. For a long time, we were not able to bring trials in here in Cumberland County, which means that the incentive to kind of finish with your criminal case, to take a plea deal, maybe to do some incarceration time, to pay a fine, all of that is easy to put off when the kind of moment of truth, which you often get in a trial, is no longer really on the horizon anytime within a year or even 2 years in many cases. So we're trying to get through that backlog. The judiciary is working very hard to try to get through that backlog with us. And I would just urge the folks of Cumberland County to both continue to be patient, but also advocate for yourselves if you have been the victim of a crime. We have tremendous victim witness advocates here in Cumberland County. Continue to reach out, remind us of your needs, and I know that we're trying to be as responsive as we can. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time, and I also expect to be back here on specific issues over the next year. So I'd welcome the opportunity to answer any of your questions or comments.
Any questions or comments from the commissioners for Jackie?
Just welcome.
Welcome.
Yes, we'll look forward to working with you, Jackie. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Our next item of business is the fourth quarter of 2022 report newsletter from the CCRCC.
And that is just for commissioners' understanding.
Okay,
Well, great job.
Yep.
It's on that
yeah,
a
very,
newsletter.
very informative.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, very good. We need no further action on that item. Any comments from the public? Are there members of the public out there? Yes, sir. We limit our comments to 3 minutes.
I'll be brief, unlike other times I've been
That's
up
all
here.
right.
Chris DeCapua, I work down at the jail, Vice President of Local 110. I just want to throw a couple tidbits out there. First, it looks like you guys are far more engaged than other times I've been up here to see some of these things, and it was very refreshing to see that, to hear the comments that you guys had during the workshop. The union leadership that is current is different than in the past. We're not an adversary to the county. We've been working with human resources and the sheriff's office and jail management since October roughly about these issues. We've had very good open dialogue. I'm very happy with how things have been going, at least in the open communication, which was stalled in our tactics in the past. Didn't allow it to be that way. But I'm going to piggyback on what the district attorney said there about the backlog. It used to be we could project what we'd have for incarcerated based on the misdemeanor arrest, but due to the bail change, the misdemeanors aren't even coming in for a booking anymore. They're getting a summons, getting kicked loose, and then when they go through the court system is where they get their sentence. Any sentence less than 9 months is going to be a county stay, or anything that's listed out as days. If it's 364 days or less, it's going to reside with us at the jail. So we don't have a very good forecast of what that might be. But the courts are planning on to pick up here in late spring to try to clear that backlog. So our numbers could really increase. Those are the big points there. And during the workshop, I really was hoping I had an opportunity to say something, but this is maybe help craft your letter that you're going to send to the sheriff on the recruitment front, where it seems to have a lot of conversations about recruiting new COs. Nobody wants to do this job. It's not glamored on TV. We're the best recruiters, but obviously we're too busy working to be active in that. We really have to go after the people that are already certified, people that recently retired from other locations, people that are currently working within a drivable area for us. And I think we need to try to shift to that. And then we don't have to worry about the academies not being put on. And there is a global feeling down at the jail. We already have the playbook for in-house academies. We did them prior to 2018. We used to do them all. We just need to get back into that if that's so the pleasure, and run them on a consistent basis. The law enforcement academies, due to the way the culture is, law enforcement's still having a hard time filling some of the positions. But if you get hired, you know that you're going in either January or August to the academy. At the SO, either we got to rely on the state to do it, or we got to take it back over on our own and set up defined dates so these candidates know when they're going to go through. And as long as it's, you got a number, I don't know what the number would that be for you guys to decide, but say if it was 5, as soon as you had 5, start the academy, and we can turn one out in 5 weeks, and we already have the playbook for that.
And you could turn that around in another, maybe
In
not the
3
next
weeks'
month, but
time, if you, in 3 weeks from today, you said we need to put on an academy at the sheriff's office, the playbook is there. We just need to know that that's what the desire is gonna be,
It's very helpful to know.
okay?
Do you have enough staff?
So we have
For the
some
academy?
customary positions that are able to come in and step in. We have 2 full-time trainers now.
Okay,
Back when we were running our own, we only had 1.
right.
So we're an increase in staffing, staff development. We have some people that work in, 2 educators right now that do inmate education, aren't doing education for inmates because of how short we are in staff. They're filling positions on the floor, but we might take a little bit more of the force over, knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel if we freed up some of these bodies to do it. There's some of us that are FTOs that don't work in I work in the transport unit, so I don't have new cadets with me anymore, but I'm still an FTO. And if it was a matter of odd shifting out for 3 weeks to get these people up, or taking 2 cadets at the same time, these are all things that have been expressed to Human Resources and Management. We're willing to do things outside of the box to get this done. We really think that we need to get this so that way we can have some sort of balance, especially coming into the summer months, because we only get like 2 months out of the whole year.
Right.
It's really enjoyable to spend with our families outdoors, so, unless you like the snow, but I don't, so. We are here to work with you. If you need anything, Sean Morissette sitting over there, he's the president of the local. I'm one of 2 vice presidents. Cody Bellier is the other one. Very open dialogue with management, with Jim, with the chief, and Human Resources. We're excited to work with you guys, and we hope there's a solution to this sooner rather than later. And we will see you next month if you have another workshop. If you're so inclined to need anything from the union, give us a little heads up of what you want us to bring, and we'll bring it with us.
Great, thank you.
That's
Chris.
good to know.
Any
Thank you.
questions for Chris?
No, I don't, no.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next item is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Move passage of the consent agenda.
I'll second.
And that includes items 23006, 23007, 23008. Any questions on those 3 items? All those in favor of passing the consent agenda? Aye. Opposed? Passes 4-0. So our next item is ARPA, ARPA, Business, American Recovery Act. And Jim, is that, I'll turn it over to
Yes,
you.
thank you. This is a opera application for Preble Street Food Security Hub, requesting additional funding as part of our Tranche 2. As the commissioners may remember, we did award, I believe it was $1.5 million in Tranche 1, and at that time, the commissioners expressed some interest in considering an application during Tranche 2, and hence the application being brought forward. I'd like to invite Compliance and Audit Manager Sandy Warren to come up and present this item for us.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, Commissioners. So as you're aware, and Jim highlighted, Preble Street, based on the impact of the pandemic, created the Food Security Hub. And so in doing so, they came to us, like Jim had mentioned, through the competitive grant application process we held last year. They were seeking $2.5 million in funding, and we awarded them $1.5 at that time. So in December, we received a request for increase in funding by Preble Street. They had expressed to the ARPA Advisory Committee that due to inflation and additional costs that they didn't foresee at the beginning of this process, mostly related to HVAC and other electrical components in the building not actually being to standard that they thought they were, was the result in this increase in request. On the staff memo I provided to you, you can see that the project is now broken into multiple phases. So due to the increase in costs, Preble Street has broken their project up into phases so that they can sort of hit milestones as they can throughout this time period. On the next page, you'll also notice that Preble Street has sought out multiple other sources as well for this funding. Some of those they've secured, some of those are still pending. Those are outlined again in the memo for you. And at this time, the ARPA Advisory Committee, along with the staff recommendation, is to provide $500,000 towards this request instead of the $1 million. And the biggest component of that is simply that the committee has received multiple requests for funding. All projects across the board, whether they'll be internal or external, are all facing inflationary cost increase. Most recently, we provided to you a request from Avesta Housing. I think this was back in November, because they also experienced high construction costs. I think at that time, they went from having a cost of, I think, $300 a square foot to $600, so it doubled. So we're seeing it everywhere, from land acquisition all the way through to infrastructure projects like this one here at Preble Street. So we anticipate that a lot of our projects we funded last year will come back to us with additional requests. So that's why the recommendation from the ARPA Advisory Committee as well as staff is to provide funding at the $500,000 level instead of the $1 million. And I'm happy to take any questions. Staff from Preble Street are here as well if you have questions about sources of funding that's not related to ARPA.
Thank you, Sandy. Any questions for Sandy?
I just, did the committee do a second evaluation of this?
They did. So in December, when Preble Street presented, the request, I just got parched, so I apologize. Got a little cotton mouth. We ran it through the ARPA Advisory Committee. So they did take a look at the request. They did look at, again, there's other requests right now that are in place that are asking us for funds that we haven't brought to. Thank you so much. To the commissioners at this time. We're still reviewing those as we speak. So yes, it has been through the ARPA Advisory Committee. Staff were a part of those conversations as well, and this is what they've recommended at this time. And of course, it's just a recommendation. Whatever you choose to approve is what we will accept.
Thank you, Sandy. Mark Swan, who is the Executive Director of Preble Street, do you have any words? Would you like to offer any further input?
Thank you very much. Well, first, thanks very much for the support last year. That was really important to us and kind of helped us move ahead with, where we were at that time. Lots happened since then. As Sandy said, we've faced, increased costs that were, far more than we anticipated. We have not slowed down at all in trying to find other funding sources, and I haven't seen the memo in front of you, but we have been pushing on the private fundraising side as much as we can. Honestly, I don't know that there's any stones we haven't turned over in that regard for private fundraising. I'm always open for new ideas. We're not shy about asking. And on the public side, we did get a congressional earmark through Congresswoman Pingree, which was fantastic. And we've gotten South Portland ARPA funding as well, which is great. But we're short. We're still short around $4+ million to fully implement this. But the need is, hasn't slowed down at all. Since I was last here, I probably talked about, we're making do at the building we're in. And when I was last here, we were probably doing 1,000 or 1,200 meals a day. We're now doing 1,900 meals a day. That's for the Boys and Girls Club, for city shelters, for Milestone Shelter, for the YMCA, for several sober homes, of course, for our own shelters. And we absolutely can't do any more. We have maxed out in that space. So the capacity to do more and provide, to help more nonprofits is really important to us. And this is a great way we can all kind of work together and collaborate without 20 different nonprofits building 20 different kitchens and hiring 20 different kitchen staff. So there's a lot of efficiencies that kick in here, and I can tell you there are nonprofits waiting for us to ramp up so we can do more to help them as well. So anything more you can do to help us, we would be greatly appreciative. And I'm happy to answer questions. Chris Saunders is here, our Chief Operating Officer as well, if there's some specifics that I can't answer.
Mark, what's your projected open date?
We're hoping to start construction this spring, and they're saying 9 months, which we take to mean
year.
14 months or so. So it would be, yeah, probably a year or so from this spring.
Great.
Are you already doing 750,000 meals a year?
More than that, Jim, more than that, Commissioner. Counting pantry meals,
yeah.
so we're doing hot meals, like I said, close to 2,000 a day, 7 days a week. And the pantry meals are skyrocketing, so it's over 1 million meals a year.
Is Wayside still active?
Yeah, they're still doing their thing. One of 2 points I want to make real quick, besides just meal capacity in terms of making it every day, the other thing we can do, which we can't do at all right now, is to freeze meals and have them at the ready when we need them. So we're really trying to, talk to people about this as part of emergency preparedness for this community. And, I was around in the ice storm of '98, and that was the busiest 2 weeks at Preble Street in the '90s. And in the 2000s, it was when the recession hit and our food numbers skyrocketed. And then, of course, the pandemic, the asylum seekers, the first time that, population showed up, we had to do 300 meals a day immediately. When Franklin Towers lost their electricity, we provided meals for 3 weeks. So emergencies happen. And so for us to be able to have on hand 50,000 individual pre-cooked meals, I think it's the responsible thing for this community to have. And the other thing, real quick, is our food processing capacity. We now work with a ton of farms, and of course with Good Shepherd Food Bank, and we process local food, local produce as much as we can. It's actually quite a bit if, given how limited capacity we have. We're going to be able to do 5-fold more with fresh, local, healthy, food. So that's another really important part of this, the connections to the local agricultural environment too.
Thanks.
Commissioners, any other questions for Mark? Steve?
I do, and this partly, it really doesn't go to Mark, it goes to ourselves. I'm not sure I understand the whole process of the reevaluation of the APRA funds. Somewhere along the line, I know that we've run into issues with our construction down at the jail site, and it was with contaminated soil. Why are those funds competing with these funds, and how does that work out?
So that's a really great question. So when we look at, we do look at internal projects and we try to shift money around where we can. If there's a grantee that we've allocated funds to that isn't using the money or we don't think is going to fulfill that agreement that we originally looked at, some projects just fall through. So we would recapture those funds and reprogram them as needed. And so that's what I've done so far, is looked at what are the projects that are failing and how can I take funds away and reprogram them to projects that need it, such as the jail. So our internal projects do take priority over external projects, and they've always have. We are working with, right now, myself, Jim, and Alex, with Bruce and the folks in facilities to look at the current jail project and ways that we can make that inflation sort of shrink that a little bit and shrink the hit, right, from that particular project. Because you're right, Commissioner Gordon, that is one that has come in very high, and the cost of material is ridiculously expensive right now. But it is something that I put as a priority on our list, and so that's again too why we look at, we might not be able to give that $1 million because we are internally looking at those project needs as we move along throughout this year, and how do we make sure that we have funds available for when that happens. And we're, again, like I said, we're working, Alex, Jim, and I, to make sure and manage those projects well so that we're not, we're definitely not getting granite countertops or anything like that. We're getting what we need, and we're making sure there's funds there to make it happen.
I guess my concern is, and I'm sure your explanation will probably take this into account, but it's a health facility that we drastically need down at the jail.
Mhm.
And to me, that would have a very high priority because those incarcerates need to have that kind of service available.
Mhm.
So again, I guess I say, how are you balancing one against the other in this particular case?
I can jump in, and Commissioner, you're absolutely correct. We're not thousands over budget, we're millions over budget in that project. And it is something that staff has been juggling for the last 2 or 3 weeks to try to scale that back to see whether we can get that number down. We have a meeting Wednesday morning to really come all together on figuring out what the next steps would be, because we need to get that project continuing to get estimated so that we have an understanding of where we're going to fall on the budget. We are yet to a place that we can come back to the commissioners and say, we need X amount of money more to do what we want to do. That's probably another month away. That might be March, it may be April, depending upon how fast we can get the estimation in. But we are working towards it, and I can't give you a number of what we are going to be over budget at this point. But we are cutting a lot of things,
Yeah.
square
And
footage and some of the amenities out of that project.
And I'm also very fiscally minded about our funds. I've always kept funding aside just for the in-case pot, as I like to call it. We know I anticipated sort of things were going to be more than what we originally thought they were. So I've always set aside some funds specifically to make sure that the jail was always going to be okay ahead of time. So I did preemptively sort of do that at the beginning of the whole process when I started. The other thing is Winchester Woods was a project that had put a proposal together. Winchester Woods, it never came to you guys because it failed, but I did set aside ARPA funds for it because we were hoping that it would happen. It was going to be a 50-unit apartment development here in Portland that was going to be purchased. The units were going to come immediately online and was going to help support homeless individuals, but it fell through. So again, those funds I've kind of recaptured and thrown towards the jail project, knowing that it was going to be over. So I do have that. It's okay. It's all set.
Yes, Sue.
In looking over the funding source for Preble Street, is I noticed that the county has given them about 1.5 million. But what concerns me is with the ones that it's still in, for instance, with the Maine legislature. They haven't, committed, correct?
Mark, I'll let you answer that one.
And also with the governor's office, the federal, was earmark. And there you're talking 3 million, and that's without, with the governor's office.
I'm not sure I followed the math, but you're right that with the legislature, we have a bill right now with the Speaker's office, and literally 3 hours ago, I was on yet another phone conversation with someone in the governor's office. So those are absolutely not slam dunks, Commissioner. That's for sure. The earmark is, that has been committed, so that is in there. And the Preble Street Board, is in a position of, needing to make some hard decisions. And, we did go back, I think I should have said this, but when we did get the increased construction costs and had, got over the sticker shock for a couple days and then went back and fairly significantly cut back, just the way I heard Jim speak about your own project. We've cut back quite a bit from what our original, vision was. And we then decided to do this in the phases that Sandy described a little bit, to make sure we can, we're going to go in there this spring and do phase one, for sure, we're going to do that. If part of your question is worried, you don't want to put money into something that's not going to happen, I assure you it is going to happen. We're probably just going to have to do it in phases.
I don't even think I can support the 500,000 because of the jail situation and a lot of other things, that have come into play. And we've already, we're given a 1.5. So at some point, I think that we need to relook, and I thought that the second staunch of all money was geared to, was other things than the first staunch of money. So.
Jim Cludier.
Yeah.
I have a couple of thoughts. I hadn't really correlated the possible increase in costs affecting opera funds down at the jail. And I assume, and if I'm assuming wrong, I stand to be contradicted, and that would be fine. I assume the staff has already assessed the current working balances, and I think Sandy already basically said that. There's money available in both ways. And we all hope that's true, and eventually the money's gonna be gone, and that'll be that. But sounds like we have resources available that would satisfy both. I gotta say that I distinctly remember, because I was not particularly happy about the reduction in the request that the committee had recommended to us on this project a year ago. And at that time, it was very explicit from basically everybody sitting at this table that we wanted them to go out and raise more money from other sources, despite the fact that they felt like they had already emptied the well. And there's a list here, and it seems like they've done that. Unfortunately, they're a little bit chasing their tail because of the increase in cost and that kind of stuff. But the reason I wanted to support it more fully last time, and the reason I would support it now, is that you have to have, it seems to me, some assessment of what the public is gaining from this activity. And that's what we should be weighing, at least on some level, against what the other opportunities are. And for my money, we are nowhere close to anything like the outcome that is achieved by this program in comparison to anything else we funded. It's just the fact. There are millions of instances of service that are going to be enabled by this. And we want to build a medical facility at the jail, that's for sure. But that doesn't involve millions. It doesn't necessarily involve thousands. Granted, their needs are much more long-term and difficult to address, but there's a population out there, and it seems to be increasing every day, that is challenged by the basic incidents of survival, and eating is one of them. I would support, if that's a concern that anybody has, we could put this off for a month and maybe get a little better information about what could happen at the jail, to be sure that the staff has correctly assumed the financial circumstances are what they believe they are. But, I remain a staunch supporter of this. It is a tremendous opportunity for the entire county community. And these people are killing themselves to accomplish it. And, a little help from us from time to time, and I wouldn't say that $500,000 is a little, but it's not, I mean, in relation to the total cost of the project, our participation on behalf of all of the citizens of Cumberland County is not overwhelming. It's appropriate, and I was delighted when I picked up the paper a couple of weeks ago, or whenever it was, and the process that everybody so roundly criticized in the Congress, where everybody got to pencil in their own pet projects, had been reinstituted, and our own representative thought, among the very few projects that she was allowed to have anything to do with, she put her thumb down hard on this project, and I was glad to see that. So, like I say, if people are more comfortable that we wait a month and try to figure this out then, I'm fine with that. I don't know if the staff has an opinion about that, but, you know, that's, it seems to me like that might be reasonable. Or if, I mean, obviously, I'd like to pass it tonight if we could, but I understand if people are concerned.
I would concur with Jim's comments. I think this goes to the heart of what county government is about in terms of reaching out to helping and providing a service and need to a wide range of citizens from a number of our towns and communities. You know, we get the quote-unquote biggest bang for our buck for nominal investment when we're talking about providing $750,000, or if not more, meals a year, 2,000 meals a day. And the need is there, clearly. It's not just in Portland, it's throughout the county, and it serves other communities. I have a procedural question, Jim. If we vote and it's a tie vote, can we bring it up again at the next meeting? And is it more appropriate for us to defer if we need to gather more information and to have the full 5 commissioners here to vote in March? And how does that impact, Mark, your timetable and where you guys are at?
Want to go first, Mark?
I've got a question for Mark, too.
Patience is a virtue, so we can be patient, and we're not in a position of needing to make a decision like this week or next week that couldn't wait a month.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Jim?
Since we have 4 commissioners this evening, if it's a 2-2 tie, the motion fails, and the prevailing side of the motion would have the opportunity to bring it forward for reconsideration at the next meeting available.
There isn't a prevailing side.
No, well, if it fails, that means your
Fails.
side would have to bring it up. Not to say you're gonna vote against it yet.
I think the cleanest, if I can offer my 2 cents,
Yes.
if there's a 2-2 tie, the cleanest way would probably just be to postpone to the next
Yes.
meeting, if that's the route you want to go.
But I might not be at next meeting. I think I have already told you
Fair
that.
enough,
so
correct.
I'm not sure. I got 2 questions for you, Mark. The one is that what you've talked about, that if you don't meet the 4 million shortfall or plus, with that you've already started to scale down. This one, new construction we're playing here, now was that the old one? Or this the new scaled down one?
Do you mind if I take a quick?
Yeah, sure, no. Well, there's a whole bunch here. This was in our whole packet. And my other question is, how far out would your services go? You know, in the county?
Oh, sure. So this is,
That's the,
is this the new one?
no, this is the old one.
Okay, that's the old one.
was presented to the ARPA Advisory Committee as part of your proposal.
Okay.
No, look, one loading dock.
Oh,
Yeah, that's the key. That's how I can figure it
That's
out.
the old one?
No, this is the new one.
Okay, this is the new one.
This is definitely the new one.
Okay, that's with the new one, but that's the scaled down version from the original.
Yes, absolutely. Essentially, there's significant chunks of, if you can see, there are 6,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
bays, and we're leaving really 2.5 or 3 mostly untouched in the
Untouched,
new,
okay.
and have only one loading dock and not two.
Yeah.
And combining the food processing space into the kitchen and a bunch of things like that, Commissioner. To answer your second question, I know we're currently with DoorDash, so DoorDash, if you're familiar with that company, they approached us to do something they're doing with like 5 or 6 states around the country, like a pilot where they would basically contract, or we'd contract with them to deliver pantry meals to specific residences. So these aren't for shelters or
Right.
for people who are experiencing homelessness. This is for people that we place in housing, or TOA places in housing, or Catholic Charities. And we basically make a referral to ourselves. We make up boxes of food, and they can actually be dietarily specific for certain people. And DoorDash drivers come to the food security hub, pick up the food and deliver it to the person just like they would for a restaurant. And the driver gets paid and they get a tip, and it doesn't cost Preble Street a dime, and it's a great way. So between DoorDash and our own pantry delivery, is it 26 towns? So 26 towns, municipalities where currently serving already through the food security hub. And the other important piece is one of our funders already to help us build this thing is Good Shepherd Food Bank, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's a great organization, and one of the main reasons they're helping to build this thing for us is they want to be essentially a customer of ours and contract with us to purchase some of these frozen meals that they will then distribute, or they'll make available to all the pantries within their network. And I know there are pantries spread around Cumberland County. You probably know better than I do in your own communities. So that's part of the way we're talking to people at the state. Quite honestly, Commissioner, is saying, hey, this isn't just a Portland or just a Cumberland County. This is going to be have tentacles throughout the state. So if there's a pantry in your community, there's a highly likely chance, if that pantry wants, that they'll be getting for free some of these frozen meals that we're going to be cooking once
But that's
we're open.
down the road.
That's after the renovations get
Right.
done. Yeah,
So-
we can't do it now, even
Right,
if we wanted
right,
to.
Right,
But that's a year out, essentially.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep, but it's forever.
Right, no,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
right. Any other questions?
No, not right now.
Steve?
Well, the only
Jim?
thing I have is with the jail part, what I get a sense from is Sandy's indicating that there are dollars set aside for the project. And if that's the case, then I guess my concerns are
Address.
addressed.
Okay, very good. So,
So I move that we allocate $500,000 as recommended by the staff and the Opera Committee for this project.
Because of the jail thing.
do we have a second? I'll second it.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah, one opposed.
The motion carries 3-1. I thank everyone for their comments and involvement.
Thank you.
And continue your great work. We appreciate it. Next item of business is new business. It's first reading of the public hearing of the home allocation plan by the CDBG program. Jim, do you have any intro comments, or can we go right to Kristen?
I was just going to invite the community director, Kristen Stiles, up to the podium to present this item. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Back in the fall of 2021 was the last time I was up here talking to you about the Home American Rescue Plan program. It's been a while. At that time, HUD had informed us that we would be receiving these funds, but they had given us very little guidance. So far, at that point, all that they had given us was the qualifying populations for these funds and the types of activities that we'd be able to do. So from the start, what we wanted to do, we are, as you may remember, in a consortium with the City of Portland. We wanted to team up with Maine Housing to make sure that everything that we were doing was aligning with what they were doing, and that we were maximizing the amount of funds coming here into Cumberland County. And then over the course of the past year, we have held a series of stakeholder meetings to make sure that we are counting all of those consultations that were required as part of the development of this plan. We also held a series of one-on-one meetings with the housing authorities, public homeless service providers, Maine Housing, Continuum of Care, and many others. In the process, we also collected data on shelter beds, the number of individuals who are unsheltered, families and individuals receiving emergency shelter assistance, and many other forms of data that were available through Maine Housing and the Continuum of Care. During this time, HUD has issued additional guidance to us and told us how to go about submitting this plan. So through that process, we have developed our allocation plan, which you have the summary, which is available online for us. And tonight is the first hearing, the first reading and the first public hearing for this allocation plan. In the staff report that you have, you'll see that we have decided to put the funding into 4 categories. The first category is $2 million for the development of affordable rental housing. Unlike our regular home program that we come to you every year, this is not just anyone under the 60% area median income could qualify. This affordable housing is specifically for these 4 qualifying populations. So most likely the type of housing that we'll be creating with this is permanent supportive housing and the Housing First model. Then we have $763,000 in supportive services. These supportive services are put in there, unlike a regular home program that does not allow for supportive services. These are put in there knowing that the type of population that we are trying to house needs that wraparound care in order to successfully remain housed. We've also put $250,000 into the acquisition and development of non-congregate shelter. And the reason that we've put $250,000 into this category is when HUD first released this, a lot of the guidance really was leaning folks receiving these funds to build non-congregate shelter, and that has changed over the past 2 years. I think HUD has realized saying you're going to build a non-congregate shelter is a lot easier said than done, and that the success of that shelter requires a lot of ongoing services that HUD at this time doesn't have the funding to address. So we have put those funds in there because we have about $250,000 in wiggle room before having to go back to HUD to amend our plan. So we can take that $250 out and put it towards the development of affordable housing, or we can add another $250 in from development of affordable housing if we do have a town or an agency that's actually willing to build a non-congregate shelter here somewhere in Cumberland County. At the current time, and what we have found is that no one is far enough along in that process for us to actually be able to do that, but we wanted to leave that wiggle room in there in case something comes up. And then the final category that we'll be putting funds into is $539,000 for planning and admin. We don't anticipate actually using $539,000 for admin, but we're following the HUD guidance of maximizing the planning and admin category, and then anything that we don't use will just get put back into one of the above categories. Like I mentioned earlier, there are only 4 qualifying populations for these funds. It's individuals that under the specific HUD definitions qualify as homeless and at risk of homeless, fleeing and attempting to flee domestic violence, and then a much more broad category that's called other populations. That other populations category is trying to pretty much capture everyone that really is homeless or at risk of homelessness that doesn't fall under HUD's very specific definition. So an example of that are runaway youths do not fall under homeless or at risk of homeless, but that's a population that would be covered under this program. And then the last point that I would like to make is that this allocation plan is only putting the funds into these categories. The allocation plan is not actually choosing the projects at this point. So once this plan is approved by HUD, which we are very hopeful that it will be with all of the data and research that we've done and all the consultations that we have conducted,
Once that's done and approved, then we will follow the RFP process and release a request for proposals similar to our CDBG application and our home application process, and see what developer or agency is willing to take on these activities here in Cumberland County. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, questions for Kristen?
No, I'm all set.
Oh, I do have a question. The 250 that you just referenced, that you were going to maintain the viability of that for a while?
Yep.
If that lapses, that will then still be available for programming, is that true?
Yes, so we would take that 250 and most likely just move it right into the development of affordable housing.
And what's the time period? Is it a year to use the funds?
No, I believe it's 7.
Oh, is it?
It's quite long with home
great.
funds, but they want us to spend them as quick as possible.
And just a reminder, this,
Seven what?
Years.
Years, yes. But that'd be from 2021,
Still, the big block of time.
yeah.
Jim?
this public hearing serving as first reading this evening. You'll see this again March 13th for second reading and final passage.
So no action is required tonight?
You can vote it through for first reading and set March 13th as second reading and final action.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor of voting the first reading? Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 4-0. Kristen, thank you again for your great and the staff's great work. CDBG.
Great, thank you.
Our next item is, Jim, for you, authorization for you to enter into a contract between the County of Cumberland and Developers Collaborative for the design, permitting, construction, and lease of administrative office building, 50 County Way.
Thank you. As the county commissioners are aware, we have been at this for quite some time. I believe we started dialogues on space needs back in 2017 with a study done and completed in 2018 that looked at 2 parcels of land that the county owns for potentially building on. The first parcel was the adjacent parking lot off to one side of the courthouse here, and the second lot being a green space down on the back side of the jail, fronting along the parkway. And it came to a conclusion through the study that, one, the county was in need of substantial space. I believe at that time it was estimated around 21,000 square feet. To be able to move some departments out of the courthouse, freeing up space for other departments within the courthouse to backfill so that people were in acceptable office spaces versus being tucked in closets and alleyways and such. The second was that the land adjacent to the courthouse was significantly more to construct, largely because of site conditions, elevation changes, and zoning within the area. That the recommendation from Oak Point at that time was that the land adjacent to the parkway down on the backside of the jail would be the ideal location to pursue. Then COVID hit, and we really didn't have a lot of time. We had some dialogue after that, but not a lot of movement, largely because we didn't have the funding mechanism to really kick this off. We have worked through this idea over the last 2 years with the commissioners, keeping the commissioners informed every step of the way. The one nice thing that we have right now is we have the opportunity for ARPA revenue loss funds to go into this funding model. And we would be using a very similar model than what the city of Portland just recently used for their shelter out on Riverside Street, and that is teaming up with a local developer financier to not only design, permit, construct, and then lease the building back to the county. And we, through this model, we worked throughout the spring of 2022 with the commissioners to to educate you on the process and what we were moving forward with. And you gave us the green light in the summer of 2022 to pursue this RFP process, which was sent out, and we received responses this past fall. This evening, we are at a point that we are recommending an award of contract to Developers Collaborative to be the contractor, the developer, the financier on this project for the county. And I'd like to take a pause now and just ask Travis to talk a little bit about the process that the RFP went through. As it was, it was about a 4-month process for us, and it was a lot of hard decisions based on the 2 responses that we had to the RFP process. So Travis?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jim. I think the most important thing that we wanted to accomplish in the RFP was to weed out anybody who wasn't completely capable of doing this, because we have a limited window. We're in a very competitive marketplace. We understand that there's some challenges in getting this project done quickly to our specifications, and working with one entity is certainly something that we wanted to make sure we did right. So we spent a lot of time drafting that RFP. We talked with other government entities across the country who have done this before and asked them for their feedback, what worked for them, what they wish they would have done. 2 law firms reviewed it, gave their recommendations. Sandy contributed to the language of the RFP. What we finally put out there, I think, accomplished our goal, which is it scared most people away. And the result is we get 2 phenomenal bids. And that was great for us, but it also presented a challenge, because the more we researched them, we just weren't finding flaws. So it became really difficult to decide which bid to go with. I go into a lot of this in the memo, but just as a quick summary, we formed a committee. Most of those members are here tonight: Jim, Alex, Commissioner Gordon, myself, Bill, Denham Facilities, and our old friend Bruce Tarbox. That team reviewed both of the applications that came in, determined that they were both thorough and complete. We got together and came up with a list of questions that we wanted to ask both firms, and then we held 90-minute interviews with each one. We went through the identical list of questions with each of them. At the end of that, we had a whole new list of questions that we came up with based on what we had heard from them and what we had learned about the process, just talking to these teams who do it before. I'm sure that Drew and Kevin can confirm that we put them through the ringer, trying to really just understand the difference between these 2 bids. So we asked for written responses to that second list of questions. I think all of these materials are in your packet. At the end of the written responses, we felt like we were starting to see a leader emerge because of the amount of thought that the Developers Collaborative team was putting into their answers. There was nothing technically wrong with the answers that the other team was providing, but these guys really seemed to be answering based on our specific project, and even anticipating what maybe our next questions might be, and answering those too. So our group got together again and again, and we finally arrived at what was our sort of elephant in the room question for each firm. We sent that out and asked for a written response. Once again, this is probably where Developers Collaborative really broke away. The answer they gave, we felt like, turned what we thought of may have been the one single potential flaw in their application into a strength. And so after a very long, spirited meeting among our committee, we finally agreed to vote, and we voted 5-1 for the reasons that are laid out in the memo. Very quickly, DC demonstrated more experience with the city's regulatory environment. We like that they're local. We like that we can see them and visit them and talk to them throughout the life of the lease, the next 15 to 20 years. We were impressed with the amount of thought that they put into their questions and answers, and we like their financial open book model. It gives us what we felt like a little bit more comfort over the amount of knowledge that we will have over every dollar spent, beginning as soon as we start a contract with them to the day that we pay the last lease and have the keys handed over to us. So at the end of it, we were able to feel really confident about the choice that we made, but it did take a significant amount of digging and headbanging and really going through these two firms as intensely as we could to ultimately, never eliminate one for flaws, but choose the one that just really stood out as remarkably capable of doing this project.
And best fit. Best fit for us. And this time is, and thank you, Travis, this time is, I would say, more important to pursue this effort than it was back in 2018. A lot has changed here at the county. We have grown over the last 4 or 5 years. Assessing is bustling at the seams down in rented space down on 4th Street. Deeds is in rented space with assessing. Just in January, we entered into another lease on Milk Street because of public health growing by leaps and bounds. No one saw that happen in 15 months into existence. And they now have 9 employees down in rented space. So we continue to be bustling at the seams here in the courthouse. COVID, we did a lot of learning about spacing employees during COVID, and when it hit the DA's office, it hit the DA's office because they are packed right into the offices down there. And we are trying to be better prepared in the future. And a building like this will not only allow us to thin staff in appropriate spaces, not only in this building, but in the new building, but it would also end 2 lease agreements that we have down in a very competitive market of the Old Port that is only getting costlier. And so we're very excited about pursuing this. We're very excited about partnering with Kevin and Drew from Developers Collaborative, and we'd ask for your support on awarding this contract this evening. If I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Kevin Bunker and Drew Significant from Developers Collaborative.
Certainly.
And if Kevin or Drew want to say anything, by all means, please have the podium.
Hi, thank you. Kevin Bunker, Developers Collaborative. I don't know how to follow that up. That was very kind. It's great to read that staff memo, and we won't let you down. I think I said that in one of my presentations, but Drew and I take this stuff personally. We take success personally. We take delivering personally. Now, there's this component of what we do, and we fleshed that out in our application about community service and doing community-minded projects, and all that's true. But obviously, we're also private developers. We want to see it do well so we can be successful, but we also know that more from a strictly even from a strictly selfish sense, your success is our success, because we're going to do another one of these RFPs, and we're going to want to win again, and we're going to have your project on there, and we want that same call that gets made to you to be the call that you made to the city and all the other ones that we've done. So it's a small state, and we know our reputation lives and dies on every single project, and we're going to do this for you. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
You have a question, Steve?
Well, not a question, I got a comment. It's a very economical design. They still don't have commissioner offices.
Yeah.
Well,
Might be an issue for you and Jim, but for Sue and I, it's not going to be.
Well,
Does
it
this
could
mean our sauna is off the table again?
Well, it could be an issue because we have to vote on it, Neil. I've been here for
Long time.
14 years at the end, and I had an office. I had a desk. I don't even have a chair now.
Yeah, but, between now and the completion of the building, I'm sure the DA's office would let you go in the closet. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of supporting the motion, say aye. Aye. Nay. Vote passes 4-0. We look forward to working with you, gentlemen. Thank you for the partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking forward.
And the commissioner's office would be a plus. Jim, you want us to hang out with you every time we have to come in?
that's why you don't have an office.
That's why, no, but I mean, but when we come on a meeting day, we have to hang out in your office.
Thanks, guys.
Oh,
Comments from the county manager?
We have one item left on, we had
he doesn't
amended
have
the
that.
agenda this afternoon, or this
Oh,
morning.
I don't have the amended one. So, item 23012, resolution supporting the city of Portland applying for federal funding to dredge the harbor, Portland Harbor at piers, docks, and wharfs.
So move.
I'll second.
I don't need any discussion, actually.
Do they get money?
We
Or is
hope.
Not from us.
We hope.
Oh, but not from us?
This is
No,
in,
this
sup-
is
this
a
is in
request.
support of a federal application that
Oh,
they're putting
okay,
in.
gotcha.
They're seeking, is it $10 million?
Yes.
One of many
Yes.
that entered in years past and never were granted. Yeah.
Oh, well,
But it is definitely needed, so, any further discussion?
no.
Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution? Aye.
Aye.
Nays? It carries 4-0. And it's resolved that we will support
Yes.
that. Thank you. Comments from the county manager?
Thank you. First off, I want to thank the commissioners on their dialogue through the workshop today. I think that was a good presentation by both Don and Alex, really giving a good snapshot of the jail and the efforts that are being taken, but also some of the barriers that we're facing in getting more boots on the ground in the jail. So thank you for your efforts, and hopefully it will pan out the way we'd like it to pan out. The only other, actually, I got two. One of the projects that I've kept you up to status with is the request that we've had from two nonprofits in the region wanting to enter into a lease agreement with the county to use half of the community corrections building. Their intent in the use of the building would be to congregate pregnant asylum seeker females who are currently in hotels or at the shelters in Portland into this building so that they can provide them better care throughout the pregnancy. That is an item that I believe that I've asked enough questions and got very granular that I can present to the commissioners a better understanding and scope of what they're asking for. And I'd like to have the commissioners think over the next 30, 45 days when an opportunity arises for a workshop to be done, because I think that would be the next appropriate process to undertake. As you may remember, you met them back in December. They came. They really didn't talk about too much into the granular intent of their proposal, more of an introduction to their nonprofits. This time would be more of the nitty-gritty of what their proposal is, and seeking commissioners' opinion of moving forward or not to a lease. I will make mention that over the last couple of months, we have had other inquiries into that building. You heard one of them this evening. The district attorney sees that building as a fantastic opportunity, much like York County is using their community corrections building for I think it's a 28-bed substance use rehab center.
Where is there a building on the campus in Alfred?
It is, yep. The district attorney's eyeing the community corrections building. And there's another group that is looking at possible transitional housing for individuals that once were incarcerated but is entering into the work field, and they want to give supports to that clientele. I've talked to people on the phone concerning that, but I have not seen the written proposal from them. So I just want to let you know that even though we've had that one group that's pretty far along in the process and has provided some information to us, we do have two other inquiries into the building at this time. But more importantly, if the commissioners are interested in pursuing, a workshop is needed to meet up with these two nonprofits to learn more about their intent.
Can we schedule that in late March? Because
We
we
can.
have a workshop on the 13th already to follow up, right, with the jail issues.
Oh, you traveled to Florida. Nice.
And the other item is just news from the cross insurance arena. The Maine Mariners are doing quite well this year. That is something that's, we were wondering how they would make out in Portland rebuilding the fan base. The fan base is strong this year. They're averaging probably 500 or 600 more people per game than they were last year. It's a good crowd there. It's a good team. They're winning games. And when you win, you put butts in seats. There have been many times that the general manager has been texting me saying, you know, we just broke this record for food and beverage sales, or, so it's a good season over at the Cross Insurance Arena as it relates to the Maine Mariners. So,
Very good, thank you.
thank you.
Alex?
Just three things, all budget related. The budget books are now out if anyone is interested in it. It's two different books, one for the half year, one for the full year, so some extra weight for anyone if they want it. This also means that it's time to send out the annual warrants to communities. We're doing it a little differently this year in that there is a formal letter explaining why they're getting two packets from Jim addressed to them, as well as the two warrants, as well as essentially an invoice that we generated internally using our accounting software, just to keep everything straight. It's a little bit more that we're sending out to the communities than usual, just because they're dealing with 2 years simultaneously. So if you get any questions from any of the towns in your region, that's why it looks a little different.
So you're sending out both warrants at the same time?
Yes. Along with explanations as to exactly what options they picked and how it all is going to shake out. So, yeah, obviously required more explanation than normal. Final note, since this came since we last spoke, the state valuation from 2022 to 2023 came back, and it was a 15.33% jump in valuation countywide from 1 year to the next. So that's a pretty unheard of number.
And you've got it by municipality?
Yeah, and there was quite a spread there, just also as a heads up. The town with the greatest growth was 27.5%, and the smallest was 7%. That would be a normal amount most years for any community. So very large spread, really showing the full extent to which things have changed pretty drastically in the real estate market over the course of the past few years.
Can you send?
Can you send that to
Yeah, I'd
us?
like to see that.
Yeah, it's based into the, would you just like that page as opposed to the whole?
Yes, I just want that page.
Yeah, I'll send you that yeah.
I just want to know who the 27% was.
It is the town of Sebago,
Is it really?
yes.
Wow.
I'm glad that's not my area.
Oh, my word.
Wow, 27%. Sebago.
They actually had kind of depressed prices for a long time.
Yeah, I guess so.
Jeez, yeah.
Who did that reevaluation?
It's a good
And
thing you're
again,
not,
this is the state equalized, so it's them taking individual town data
when Neil's not
and
running
running through
again.
their own metrics on it. Which is part of why such a large number is so unusual.
Wait till they see their school budget.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Great, thank you. Catherine, any comments?
Just one, there's been, we purchased some agenda software, and we've been kind of customizing it and getting it ready to roll out, and it should hopefully streamline everything so that when you get the packet, you get the whole packet, and, I can't really fully explain it, but it'll be a lot easier to access and read. And we're hoping that next month is going to be the go live date, so we're gonna do a test run. I just want to give you guys a heads up that, I'm gonna be sending it out through, our new agenda software, which is called BOCC.
Great news,
Oh,
look
that's
forward to it.
good.
Thank you.
Is it a PDF file?
Yes, if you want to, I think the town of Wyndham uses it, and so if you wanna get an idea of what it looks like, I can send you a link to their portal, and how it's laid out.
I can wait.
And it may be more beneficial if you bring your iPads or laptops than the PDF that we just print out. I think it's really streamlining us to less paper and doing it off the computer.
Travis?
Nothing else tonight.
Nothing going on in Augusta?
There's a lot going on in Augusta. So the Appropriations Committee is starting work on the biennial budget. County jail funds flat funded for 5 or 6 years now, but at a level that we fought hard for. So there's a handful of things that I'm keeping an eye on that may be relevant to us specifically. One in particular, since we're doing this study about potential regional collaboration for fire and EMS, Blue Ribbon Commission has recommended injecting tens of millions of dollars into local EMS, but they don't exactly have recommendations for how. So we're going to engage on encouraging them to look at regional collaboration as a good place to capitalize some investments and look for ways to help encourage communities like those in Cumberland County who are having trouble doing things on their own to try and do them together. Specific issues, happy to talk to anybody offline about if there are things that you'd like for me to be monitoring or engaging on. But they're up and running and they're doing it in person.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Commissioners, Sue,
No, I'm all set.
Steve.
Yeah, I'll add with what Travis is talking about. I'm in fact scheduled to go up and speak to the Criminal Justice Appropriations meeting this tomorrow afternoon. The Department of Corrections is presenting their budget, and what Travis, I think, is alluding to is that they flat funded us being all the jails in the county, to a figure that was passed last year. We are trying to have that increased, and somehow the commissioner did not get the message that he was responsible for finding out some information, et cetera, so we're behind the 8 ball right now. On the other hand, we have got the information in and we'll be asking for it. There's an additional 1.4 million to be added to the 20 million something. The second thing is, which the MCCA is going after, is rural patrol. There's a number of counties that have rural districts that the state police have kind of relinquished what they're doing as far as their function, and it appears the counties are trying to fill in. Well, the cost of doing that and to get a individual set up for rural patrol is somewhere between $120,000 and $150,000 a year. So there's going to be some activity there. That near as we can tell, this is just the rural communities, not anything that's got a big municipality in it. It's going to be somewhere around $10 million, and I think they're going to hiccup in that. And I leave it at that. There are a number of other issues that we're chasing or following because it's beginning to impact, again, the jails. They were looking at providing more services. They're looking at trying to not have some of the services that we have now, but put them in a different category. So we're struggling. We're struggling. But so be it. It's the legislature.
Thank you. Commissioner Cludier.
I have nothing, thanks.
Wait a minute. Excuse me?
No, he talked all night.
I've run out of words.
It's not good for
It
his
must be your
voice.
cold, huh?
Yeah.
I think it must be, yeah.
I have no further comments.
And I suggest we go into an executive session.
Yes. Is that a motion?
Yeah.
Pursuant to, Steve, you want to read it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pursuant, the county commissioners will enter into an executive session in accordance with MRSA 4056D for the opportunity to discuss negotiations between the county and law enforcement unit local 340.
So we are in executive session.
Vote, right?
All in favor?